Welcome to episode 100 of Terror at Collinwood, and I can't think of a better way to celebrate the 100th episode and Thanksgiving than with my very special guest today, Jerry Lacy. Before we get to the show, I want to talk to you about a couple of things. Speaking of 100th episodes, congratulations to the Classic Horrors Club podcast. They just reached their 100th episode, so congrats, Jeff and Rich. It was a pleasure being part of that episode. I submitted a clip for that, so check out their 100th episode. Now, before we get to the show, I just want to let you know that I'll be participating as Penny Dreadful in the Kojo's Toy World annual toy drive on Sunday, December 8th, at The Vault, which is at 791 Purchase Street in downtown New Bedford, Massachusetts. Doors are at 4 and the event starts at 5. Goods Time Live, hosted by pro wrestler Teddy Goods, will be happening. The event will be a live stage show featuring guests from the wrestling world, toy universe, music, pop culture, and more. But I'll be bringing my own special guest. You might call him the guest of your dreams, or perhaps nightmares. 3 toys gets you free admission, 5 toys gets you a special gift, and whoever donates the most toys will receive something very special. And if you haven't been to Kojo's Toy World at 104 William Street in New Bedford, I highly encourage you to check it out. It's a great store filled with many wonders, and I'll put a link to Kojo's Instagram in the show notes. And last but not least, I want to thank Ansel Faraj for putting me in touch with Jerry Lacy and also providing loads of photos in the video version of this episode. So if you want to see some great photos, jump on over to YouTube. In addition, I'd like to thank Randy Vest, who runs Jerry Lacy's Friends, the only official Jerry Lacy Facebook group, for also allowing me to use several photos that have been posted to the group, many of which were taken by the late Gloria Lillibridge, who ran Jerry's fan club starting in 1969 all the way through running Jerry Lacy's Facebook page until she passed away just a couple of years ago. So this episode is dedicated to Gloria's memory. There's nowhere to run, there's no place to hide. This podcast is fun, but there are spoilers inside. Welcome to Terror at Collinwood. 'Tis I, Penny Dreadful, and I am joined by the one and only, the incredible Jerry Lacy. Jerry Lacy is an actor and writer who has appeared on television, film, and on stage in a number of roles. He played the ghost of Humphrey Bogart on Broadway and on film in Woody Allen's Play It Again, Sam. He portrayed Simon Gilby in As the World Turns, Rick Latimer on Love of Life, and was part of the ensemble on CBS's Comedy Tonight. Along with his wife, actress Julia Duffy, he appeared in Designing Women and wrote an episode of Newhart. He starred as the villainous Doctor Mabuse in Ansel Faraj's compelling trilogy of films. And of course, he is beloved by Dark Shadows fans for his portrayals of Reverend Trask, Tony Peterson, Reverend Gregory Trask, Mr. Trask the butler, and Lamar Trask during different time periods in the series, and a minister in House of Dark Shadows. Welcome to the show, Jerry.
My pleasure. Nice to be here.
Oh my goodness, it's so great to see you. How are you feeling? I know over the summer you had an accident. You broke your leg,
Yes.
as I recall, and everyone was very concerned about you. And I know everybody's been asking how you're doing. So how are you feeling?
Well, it's mending, coming along pretty well. I understand it'll take a full year before everything is completely back in order, but right now everything seems to be in good shape.
Oh, good. I'm really glad to hear that. I'm glad you're doing well, because I know everyone was very concerned, and over the summer, we were over in Burbank at the Dark Shadows Remembrance Weekend, and everyone heard about that had happened to you, and we were all worried. So it's great to hear that you're doing well.
Well, I was doing something that I shouldn't have been doing, which was doing some gardening on a steep hillside, and one foot slipped, and down I went and landed right on a little stump or something that was sticking up, and it broke my
Yeah.
leg.
Oh my goodness. Wow. Well, I'm glad you're doing well, and thank you for taking the time to do this. And I want to thank Ansel Faraj as well for putting us in touch with each other. I know you've worked with Ansel quite a bit, and I want to get to that and talk a little bit about your work with Ansel. But let's look back at some of your history here as a performer. Uh, I've told a few people I'm going to have Jerry Lacy on the podcast. They said you're going to have Reverend Trask on the podcast. I do my during for 10 years or so, I did this local TV show as Penny Dreadful the Witch. I would introduce old horror films on local TV here in New England. So I was like, oh, it's going to be Reverend Trask versus Penny Dreadful. It's good. And what a perfect episode for this is going to be the Thanksgiving episode. So what a perfect episode for Thanksgiving to have Jerry Lacy on. So you were born in Sioux City, Iowa, right?
Correct.
Yeah, and then you made your way out to you joined the military, right? And then you went out to you then you moved out to Los Angeles, right?
Well, the military actually brought me out here. I joined the Marines instead of finishing high school, and they brought me to California for boot camp, and then a few months of training at Camp Pendleton, and then off to Korea for a year, and then back to Camp Pendleton to serve out my 3 years. Actually, I joined the Marines in the Midwest, and they
Okay.
brought me to California.
Ah, I see. Okay.
I
Yeah.
left Kansas City on the train with a bunch of other guys and who had never been to California before. And it took us, I think, 2 nights, 3 days to get out here.
Hmm.
It was in 1953.
Hmm.
And I still remember pulling into California, getting close to Los Angeles, going through the orange groves.
Oh, wow.
You could reach out and grab an orange off of a tree from the moving train as it was
Wow.
moving slowly through them. Yeah, it was very exciting for a young guy from the Midwest.
Yeah, I would imagine so. I mean, what a sight to behold as you're entering. It's like magical
Like an
almost, right?
orange off a tree. Yeah.
Yeah, wow. And then, did you go to school out there when you were out in California? Is that how you got into acting out there? I seem to recall
Yes.
something about you taking a pantomime class or something.
Yes. After the Marines, I stayed in California and went to college and majored in theater arts. My first class, as you probably heard, was a pantomime class, and I just caught the bug while I was there. That's all.
Yeah,
No turning back.
right. Yeah, for sure. And I mean, you have a natural gift. It's just you have this gravitas about you. And any role that I've seen you in, there's a gravitas that you have that's just very compelling to watch. And you can't take your eyes off at any character I've seen you do from Dark Shadows days all the way and Play It Again, Sam, and Ansel's films. And I know how excited Ansel was to have you as
Yes.
in his films. It's just really great. Now, did when you were in California, what made you decide to go out to New York?
Oh, well, after I finished college, I started making the rounds, agents and things in Hollywood, and was turned down everywhere I went. And meanwhile, a couple of my classmates had gone ahead to New York. And after about a year and a half, I guess, I decided that it was a better chance in New York to get ahead. And I found it truly was. In those days, you were able to get in to see agents. You didn't have to make an appointment weeks in advance, and you could go in. You could make rounds there and go in virtually every day if you wanted to. And there would always be somebody there to greet you. You could leave a picture and talk to them. And it worked out much better, much easier way to get into the business at that time. I
Yeah.
wouldn't say that was still true today.
It seems like it would be almost, I mean, I don't want to say impossible these days, but very difficult for a young actor to even live in New York, never mind try to get seen by an agent or anybody. I mean, I hear younger people that are going out there in groups, they'll all get a really small apartment and they'll all live together crammed in one
Right.
apartment. It's difficult these days. I mean, people still do it, but it's much more challenging, I think.
Well, it is, yeah. And we did the same thing going the other way. Three of us from my class in college shared an apartment for the first, probably nearly 3 years before we started making enough money to be able to afford our own apartment. But
Now, when you were out in New York, you studied with the legendary actress and instructor Uta Hagen, right?
yes, yes,
Wow, what was
among
that
other
like?
people. Yeah, that was very special. I was very lucky to get into her class. I had to audition to do so. And I was taking other classes at the Herbert Berghoff studio at the time, which was uh, her husband, Herbert. You know about this, right?
Mhm.
I mean, Herbert was her husband, Uda's husband. Anyway, so I took other classes there, and I had one class with her only.
Just that must have been a very interesting person to have as an instructor.
Well, I guess you could say that. Uh, at the time, I don't think I was fully aware of her stature in the business, and I have nothing to relate in the way of some sort of a wonderful story that
Yeah,
happened in her class. It was uh, um, a scene study class. We would do scenes from plays, and she would correct us and advise us, and then we'd do it again.
yeah. Now, you were during this time, you were uh, doing a lot of theater in New York at this point already when you were taking these classes at this time.
Well, yes, I was fortunate in that I got a job shortly after I got there at Theater in the Square, which
Mhm.
was then down in the Village. It was an off-Broadway theater at that time, and it was very famous. Jose Quintero had directed a production of Desire Under the Elms, and it has a crowd scene in it. Probably there were 12, 15 of us who were supposed to be the local townspeople. And I replaced somebody in that at that point and stayed in it for most of that first year. And it was a non-equity part and
Mhm.
had no lines or anything. We just were crowds people, and we yelled when we were supposed to yell, and we danced when we were supposed to dance, whatever.
Uh-huh.
And when the final week of I guess it was about the last month of the show, um, the man who played the sheriff, uh, small part, left the show, and the producer put me in that part. And it was the sheriff has the very last line of the play, and I relished that little part because I could get a response from the audience with that line,
Uh-huh.
and if it was said right. And I've seen the play done since several times, and the actor that I saw didn't bother to try and get that response. But I got it, and I could hear, the theater and the round, people were close by,
Yeah.
and I could hear them go, oh,
Yeah.
and I knew I hit it.
Yeah. Oh, that's so rewarding, when you
Very
nailed.
rewarding, yes.
Yes. Yeah.
And then I asked the producer, Ted Mann, if he would give me an equity contract for the last week of the show. And he says, why? Why do you want that? You won't be able to do these free parts anymore. There are so many of those around. And I said, no, because I want to be a professional.
Yeah.
And I need that equity contract to become a professional. And so he agreed and gave it to me and even paid me.
Fantastic. That's great. Oh my goodness. Now, before you went to Dark Shadows, you had worked with Nancy Barrett and David Ford. Prior to that, it was the Wayside Theater, I think. Do you remember anything about working with them or meeting
Well,
them?
I didn't work with Nancy. Nancy wasn't there.
Oh, I see. Okay.
David was coming down to the Wayside Theater in Virginia just to do the play, and he had to go back to New York for Dark Shadows performances.
I see.
And I had never heard of Dark Shadows,
Uh-huh.
and I understudied him. And when he left to go to New York, I played his part in the play.
Oh, wow. Huh.
And then after that, I was hired because of work that I had done there. I was hired at the what was the name of that theater in Pennsylvania? Famous theater. Anyway, I went there and did, I think 5 or 6 plays there.
Mhm.
And one day I got a call that Dan Curtis wanted to see me in New York. And apparently David had told him about me. And so I went to New York and I met him, and he said, can you come to work Monday?
Wow.
And I said, he said, yes, because the play was closing on Saturday night. So
Oh, great. Did you have to even read for the part of Tony
he didn't.
Peterson, or was
No.
he just, wow, that's amazing.
He hired
Wow.
me basically on David's recommendation.
That's great. Oh, that's so cool that David did that,
Isn't it?
Did you get along very well with David?
Yes, well, I got along with pretty much everybody.
Yeah.
I'm pretty easygoing.
Yes.
However, I will say that I didn't have a lot of social contact with them because I don't know, it wasn't the kind of show where people got together a lot. Like later on, Love of Life, for instance, we got together, and um, I think it was probably because I wasn't that active on Dark Shadows, especially before we started doing Trask.
I see.
Um, and if you're only on once a week or so, you don't really build a relationship. Also, the working was tight. You came in at 7:30 in the morning and went right to work, and you were done but like at 1:30. Then if we were on the next day, which was rare for me, we would go right upstairs and have a read through for tomorrow's script and go home. So there wasn't a lot of socializing.
What was Dan Curtis like when you first met him? What was your reaction to him?
Well, he's a big, imposing guy, and I'd been waiting in the outer office for quite some time while he and Bob Costello and David Ford were having a meeting. And I could hear these 3 big guys and these booming voices coming out of there. And I thought, what in the world is going on? And then they came out, and Dan just walked right up to me and shook my hand and said, "It's nice to meet you." He didn't really look me over, and he just said, "Can you come to work Monday?"
Yeah.
And I said, "Sure."
Your first role was Tony Peterson in the show, who was a lawyer and kind of leaned into the Humphrey Bogart aspect a little bit, just
A
the look
little
of
bit.
a little bit, not hard, but just the kind of a little bit of the vibe, the attitude and stuff. I
Yeah.
loved Tony Peterson. And any thoughts on that character?
There wasn't really much written in. Tony Peterson was kind of just a straight-laced lawyer. He
Yeah.
wasn't. wasn't a very exciting character.
Yeah. No, I mean, in comparison to something like Reverend Trask, it's certainly, not
Right.
not that type of character for sure. But
Yeah.
I liked Tony, and then of course he went on to play the Reverend Trask, the fanatical witch hunter when they went into the past. So how did you get cast as Reverend Trask from going from Tony Peterson to Reverend Trask? That's a hugely different character. So how did that happen?
They just came to me one day
Yeah.
and said, "This is your new character you're going to play when we go into the past."
That's great. Wow.
And so I worked with the makeup man to develop a look.
So you had input on the look of the character?
Oh,
You had
yes,
input? Yeah. Mhm.
yes. Yeah, we worked together on that
Mhm.
closely. And I don't know, I guess I read the first script and developed my idea of what this guy was like.
Yeah. Very much pulled from something like The Crucible. It had that whole,
Hmm.
you
Yeah,
know,
that
this
did, yes.
fanatical witch hunter. And the thing I love, I mean, I loved all your characters on the show, but you did several Trasks actually. But this one, the first one,
It was the
he,
best.
I think he is because he genuinely believes in what he's
Right.
saying. The Gregory Trask is a hypocrite, but this
Just a
one,
crook. Yeah.
yeah, he is a fanatic and he believes every word he says and
That's right.
with conviction. And it's really just what a great character and scary too. To this day, I'm kind of a love to hate kind of character, but I love Trask. It's just like so much fun to watch just because he's crazy. He's just. Did you have a
He's
lot of fun doing that?
Yeah, I love playing that part. I would never have been cast in that part, I don't think, if I hadn't been just handed it. But
And,
it gave me a chance to really, dig into a character deeply and believe in him and believe in what he believed in.
sure, yeah,
Make
and
him real. I just
yeah,
tried to make him real.
yeah, and the look of him too. Like that's really great that you had input on his overall look, like with the widow's peak and the
Yeah,
black, and you
that
see
was a
him and
little
you know
piece
right
that
away he's
we built. That wasn't that little widow's piece.
uh-huh.
Widow's peak, yeah, came down to a point. That was one we designed, me and the makeup man.
Vinny Lascalzo, yeah, yeah, yeah. So Trask, and he came back as a ghost later on. We saw, but there's of course that iconic scene in the show where Barnabas walls Trask up in the Cask of Amontillado riff on the Cask of Amontillado, which was
Right.
I had nightmares about that one when I was a kid when I saw that for sure. And then so we continued on. You played several characters in the show. Then subsequently you played descendants of Reverend Trask. You played Gregory Trask, the hypocrite
Yeah.
character. He's rotten. I mean, of all the people talk about a lot of monster characters in Dark Shadows, but I think Reverend Gregory Trask is probably the
Of
biggest
course.
monster of all. Would you agree?
Yeah. Liar, cheat, womanizer, everything you can think of, all wrapped up in Gregory Trask.
Did you have fun playing that part too? What was your approach to that one in contrast
Well,
to,
you had to play him, just as he was. He was a con man and a crook, and he was duplicitous and devious, and that was his whole life.
yeah. Oh, so much fun to watch though. It's just
Yeah.
so much fun. And I have to show you this. My friend Ivan, who I'm going to bring onto the podcast at some point, last Christmas got me this as a gift. He found this on eBay and I have to show it to you. It is a Reverend Gregory Trask box. Like somebody's an artist, a fan artist. So Dean Monahan is the artist's name. You had this on eBay. It's a Reverend Gregory Trask wooden box.
Yeah. So how neat.
Isn't that great? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, to this day, your characters are just there's people are still celebrating your performances on the show.
I know it's still surprising to me that it's still going. It's running right now somewhere.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
on
I was
Tubi. Yeah.
I happened to be in my dermatologist's office on Thanksgiving, and a lady dressed as a witch, of all things, came up to me and said, "Oh, my son is watching the current, Dark Shadows now, it's on the air someplace.
That's
Yeah.
great. I love that.
Yeah.
So you went on and you played the butler Trask in the parallel time storyline. Did that get confusing for you as an actor where they're switching timelines into like parallel universes, or did just, well, this is another Trask and you got to learn this, or what?
Yeah,
How
it's just
yeah,
pretty much just, dealt with what it was each time. I wouldn't say anybody got confused.
yeah, because they were going into parallel universe versions
Well,
of the
that
show.
got kind of confusing. Yeah.
And you were the butler
I
Trask
could
during
never quite get my head around the parallel, but I didn't have much to do in that one anyway. So.
Yeah, yeah, it was you were in it, you weren't in it a whole lot in that, but you had this butler character. It was an interesting character, but I think they didn't go anywhere with the character. I know you were very busy during that time too, because I want to talk about this as well, because you were also doing Play It Again, Sam, on Broadway. So I mean, you were doing double duty and doing Dark Shadows and doing Play It Again, Sam. So
Right.
that must have been quite intense. And then you played Lamar Trask, the son of the original Reverend Trask. Any thoughts on that character?
He was the funeral director.
Correct. Yes. Yep.
Um, I really don't remember playing him at all. I don't remember any of the plot.
That Trask, I think he was seeking revenge for his father's death because he found out that the Barnabas had walled up his father and killed him. So I honestly almost kind of felt bad for that version of Trask, for the son of Trask, because he kind of had a point in being upset about that. I could kind of see why he would be upset about that. And then you also did House of Dark Shadows as a minister. Any thoughts on House of Dark Shadows?
That was, just a very tiny part.
In the rain, I remember you were
In the
doing
rain.
the
Yes, we
funeral
shot in the
scene.
rain that day. It was, but that's all that was.
Yeah, and you were supposed to be in Night of Dark Shadows as Reverend Trask, but you couldn't do it because you were filming the film version of Play It Again, Sam, in LA at that
Right.
time,
Yeah.
right?
So they had Thayer David did the part as Reverend Strack.
Yes, yeah, yeah. Just kind of rejiggered the name there. So,
Yeah.
but that would have been. I talked to Ansel about this once when he was on the podcast, and we were wondering, what it would have been like if I love Thayer David too, but it would have been great to have seen your Trask in that film too. I would have been amazing to see that.
Yeah, I would have liked to have done it, but
Yeah, sure. Now, I mentioned Play It Again, Sam, and I want to talk a little bit about that. During your time on Dark Shadows, you went to audition for the ghost of Humphrey Bogart and Play It Again, Sam. And I mean, there is certainly a resemblance to Bogart. How did you? I've read about this in this great book that was by the late Craig Hamrick, called Dark Barnabas and Company, and it breaks down all the careers of all the cast members of Dark Shadows, and it talks about how you basically went, and I admire this. You went and to audition for the part, and you kind of like really pushed to get that audition. Can you talk about that a little bit, about Play It Again, Sam?
yeah, I was, whatever agent I had at the time, a small agent, was unable to get me in for an audition, even though he tried. And I knew I had a really good shot at getting that part if I could just get in there. And so one day I threw on my trench coat and hat and went to the stage door on a day that I knew they were holding auditions. And there was a whole line of actors out there and at the stage door in the alley behind the theater. And I went up the steps. And when the stage manager came to ask the next actor in, I butted in and I said, I'm sorry to bother you, but I really think I'm right for this part, and I really want to have an audition. And he looked me over and he said, I tell you what, he said, if you can't get in by regular means, I will get you in. And so I said, okay. And in the meantime, my agent did get me an interview with the casting director. And so I went to his office, and this wasn't an audition for the part. It was just to meet him and try to get his okay to get me an actual audition. And that went well. It went well, and I wore my trench coat and hat in there too, and did some Bogart for him. And he said, "Well, all right." He said, "I think you should audition." So I got an actual legitimate audition. I didn't have to get in through the stage manager. And at that point, I was kind of just a shoe-in. I mean, I went in and I did the first scene in front of this dark theater. And somebody says, "Can you take off the hat?"
Mm-hmm.
And I took off the hat, and somebody said, "Oh my God, he looks even more like him without the hat on." So I thought, "Oh, that's very positive." And I had done some makeup too to enhance a little bit the Bogart look.
When did you become aware of your resemblance to young Humphrey Bogart? Did people comment on that regularly, or was that?
No, the first time was in a play in college. I did.
Okay.
I was playing a gangster in a play, and there was a lot of gangsters. A play called Broadway about a speakeasy in the 20s, and it was all run by gangsters. You know, a lot of gangsters involved, and I had done the play one night, and a lady came backstage and she says, "I just had to come back and tell you, you look so much like Humphrey Bogart." Of course, we were all in tuxes, you know, in the 20s garb with their hair slicked back. And so I thought, Humphrey Bogart, not very handsome or good looking, but he's a great actor. And by chance, on television that night was a Humphrey Bogart movie, The Petrified Forest. And I recorded it on my tape recorder, voice, and played it back and listened to it. I picked one speech and I worked on it, working on his voice. And so the last night of the play in college, I picked one line that I was going to do like Bogart. It was a short line. It was actually one of the gangsters had a gun and the cop was there. And he said, I'm taking your gun, and the guy wouldn't give it to him. And then Louis, the head gangster, says, "Give him the gun." And he still wouldn't. And then my line was, if Louis says to give him the gun, give him the gun. Something like that. And I did it like Bogart, and the house just screamed. The audience just went nuts on that one line. And that was the only one I did. But I realized that I could really do it. I mean, if it caught the audience like that. And so I kept it in my repertoire, as we say.
Yeah.
You know, when I got to New York, I would do it occasionally when I was in an audition or something, and just to help people remember who I was. You know?
Yeah.
And then this part came up.
Yeah.
I don't think I did it at all. I mean, professionally until Play It Again, Sam.
Yeah. What was it like working with Woody Allen?
What do I say? Woody Allen is just as neurotic as he pretends to be. It's a good cast. We had fun, and I enjoyed working with Woody. I don't know. There are a lot of things came up in the years since that I know nothing about. But.
Yeah. Now you then did the film version of Play It Again, Sam, and what was that experience like in comparison to doing it on Broadway?
It was actually pretty similar because Herb Ross, the director, let us do exactly what we did on stage, but in the confines of whatever apartment we were shooting in, or alley, or department store, was a grocery store. But so there was really very little difference, and I got very little direction from him. He just allowed us to do what we did. So it was, it went well. I just always felt bad about Diane Keaton,
Yeah.
slapping her in the face and taking the gun away from her in that scene every night.
Oh,
Still feel bad about it.
what was it like working with Diane Keaton?
Well, she's lovely, she's just an adorable girl. And uh, she's a good actress and she's strong. And uh, I dreaded doing that scene every night because
Yeah.
she would just look at me right straight in the eye, and I would grab the gun out of her hand with one hand and slap her in the face with the other
Oh,
hand. And sometimes afterwards, backstage, she'd be wiping the tears out of her eyes and hiding it from me.
oh,
And I know because you try to slap with just to make the noise, but that's
yeah,
when in the theater they want to hear it.
right.
In movies they can add the slap in,
Sure.
and but sometimes I'd catch her a little too high, a little too low on the jaw or something. This
Oh,
was very fast, and it would hurt her. It would hurt
yeah.
her. She would cry, and she would hide it from me as best she could.
Oh, geez.
Sweetheart.
Yeah. Oh, gosh. Um,
I've never had a chance to really apologize to her for
yeah.
that, and I still feel bad about
Oh, well, maybe she's listening to this.
it.
um,
Um,
Now in 1970, this is fun too because I love that you did sketch comedy, and you were on Comedy Tonight, and it was
Comedy
some
Tonight.
Comedy Tonight and 20th Century Follies. And
Yes.
I have a background in sketch comedy too. I studied at Second City and Improv Asylum, and I
Oh, you
love
did.
sketch comedy. Yeah, yeah. So how how did you get involved in that? And you even did a Dark Shadows spoof in that Strangest Shadows with the
Yes.
wonderful Madeline Kahn, who I love
Right.
Madeline Kahn. Talk about that. How did that come about?
That show had already been cast and
Mhm.
was ready to start rehearsal when one of the actors dropped out. And I was with William Morris Agency at that time, and apparently they called William Morris and said, "We need somebody who can do sketch comedy, and we need him right now because we go into rehearsal tomorrow." And so they sent me over, and I went into rehearsal the next day. And the worst part of it is that the first day of rehearsal in the rehearsal hall, there was a grand piano over in the corner of this empty hall. And somebody said, "Okay, kids, let's gather around the piano. I want to get everybody's range." And I don't have any range. I'm practically tone deaf.
Oh,
And of course, everybody else could sing. And so I thought, well, I'm out of here. But they kept me anyway. And I guess in the credits, you see us all up there singing away. And but there was the recorded sound that was playing was without me. But I really enjoyed doing sketch comedy,
yeah.
even though some of them were really kind of stupid. But that's the way sketch comedy is.
Exactly. Yes, and it was so much fun, and there was
Yeah.
such a great cast in that too. It was like Peter Boyle and Robert
Yes.
Klein was in that, and Nipsey
Yeah.
Russell, and and I said Madeline Kahn, and so many intro. Rodney Dangerfield was in that. On YouTube, you can see if people look this up on YouTube, Comedy Tonight, Strangest Shadows. So it was a
Oh,
parody
is
of
that
Dark
on
Shadows.
YouTube?
It
Oh,
is,
I
yeah,
didn't
and
know
you
that.
were like the Barnabas character in it.
Yeah.
Did you write that sketch, or did
No,
they?
no, no,
No,
no.
did
I
they
don't
wait
know.
it because you were in comedy
Yes.
to Okay.
Obviously, right.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it was really, really fun. That's on, yeah, people can watch that on YouTube. And then later you were on a soap opera called Love of Life, and that's
Mhm.
where you met the wonderful Julia Duffy on that show. You played Rick Latimer on that. So can you talk a little bit about that experience?
Let's see. That happened after we finished shooting Play It Again, Sam. I went back to New York. Uh, Well, yeah, I guess 20th Century Follies was in there also. I did
Yeah.
that in Los Angeles before I came back to New York. And yeah, then I went on as Rick Latimer on Love of Life, and Julie was on the show, but we didn't have any scenes together.
Mhm.
Um, but we met, got to know each other a little bit.
That's great. And then she went on to do Newhart, and you wrote an episode of Newhart too.
Two, yeah,
Two episodes.
2 episodes, yeah.
Um, do you enjoy writing as much as acting? Or is it just like a different skill set, or is it, they're both creative endeavors? I mean, what do you find
Right.
more rewarding, I guess?
Well, I think acting is more rewarding because you get the audience feedback, especially if you're
Mm,
doing a live show.
mhm.
And writing is kind of a whole different thing. I still write. I enjoy it. I write mostly for enjoyment now. I guess I enjoy it from the point of view that you can get in, you have to get into the character of each character,
Mhm.
get into their head and look at it from their point of view and try to make it all make sense,
Mhm.
which I'm constantly seeing on television that people do things that don't fit their character. And
Yeah.
I see it a lot.
Right. Yes. Yeah, for sure. It's just more plot driven than character driven choices that are made sometimes. Yeah. You've been married to Julia for 40 years. That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
wonderful.
And we went together for 12 years before we got married.
Wow.
So we've
Wow.
been together for what, 50 some
Wow.
years.
50. So, yeah. Congratulations. That's just
Thank
so
you.
wonderful.
It's been
Um,
lovely.
and you got to play husband and wife in, at least one thing I'm aware of is that the Love Boat was
Love
like a
boat, yes.
Valentine's Day TV movie.
Right.
It was, oh, the Valentine Voyage. That's what it was. Do you have any memories of that? Any thoughts on that?
Valentine's.
Valentine Voyage, the Love Boat. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Well, I was the Love Boat chef
Yeah.
and didn't really have anything to do with the plot of that particular. That was a 2 hour movie kind of thing, but I don't know. It was lovely. We were in the Caribbean. We had our daughter with us, little
Yeah.
Carrie,
Oh,
and Julie's mother.
that must have been fun.
It was.
Now you continued to write. You mentioned wrote 2 episodes of Newhart. You were on Designing Women as well with Julia, as I recall, the TV show Designing Women. I think you were in an episode of that as well, right?
It was in one episode of Designing Women. Yeah.
You continued to act, and I've just looked at your IMDb, and you did several films. But talk a little bit about Ansel Faraj, our mutual friend, Ansel Faraj. How did your involvement with Ansel come about? Because Ansel Faraj is no stranger to the Dark Shadows fans. He's made quite a few films with the Dark Shadows repertory company, with many of the actors. And you were in The Last Case of August T. Harrison, and you were, of course, in the Doctor Mabuse trilogy, which is available on Blu-ray, and it's a excellent film series for those who have not seen it. And Jerry plays Dr. Mabuse. So, how'd you first encounter Ansel and get involved in his films?
He wrote me an email. I think he got my email address from Catherine Scott, and he wrote me an email and said that he had this script, that he was a student filmmaker. I had done a couple of little scenes for student filmmakers. I always tried to accommodate them, because they need a competent actor to show off what they can do to their teachers and helps them get going. So I just thought he was another student filmmaker that I didn't know that Catherine and Lara were already involved at
Yeah.
that time. He didn't tell me that. And he just said that he would like me to play this part. And I thought it was, a scene like the other ones were that I did. These kids would do scenes for class.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought it was a scene for the class. So I said, sure. I thought it'd take me 15 minutes one day. And And so I said, send it over. And well, he sent it over, and it was a full script. And I said, "You're making a full movie here. What is?" He said, "Yeah." I had yet to get to know Ansel and see how large his vision was. And so I read it, and it was good. So I thought, well, yeah, I loved the character,
Yeah.
and so I agreed to do it. And then I found out that that Lara and Catherine were also in it, and mm, it was all pretty, I would guess, technically low scale. I mean, he shot it on a little handheld camera this big, like a
Sure.
little, and with no boom, no. He shot it in his aunt's garage.
Yes. Yep.
That
Yep.
was
Yep.
his studio, and he did a marvelous job with it. I
He
was
really
so
did.
impressed with it.
Yeah. He really did. And he's definitely over the years, you can see the progression in his,
Yes,
and
he's come a long way.
absolutely. Yeah. It was great seeing you and you were fantastic as this criminal mastermind. Dr. Mabuse an iconic film character from, do you ever watch any of the Dr. Mabuse films like the Fritz Lang Testament of Dr. Mabuse?
Yeah, I've seen all three of them, the three main ones. Yeah.
Now, also, I mean, I mentioned several of the Dark Shadows cast members have been in Ansel's films, and I know you did a lot of the Big Finish audio dramas with several of the Dark Shadows cast members reprising your roles from the show, playing new Trask descendants. It was a lot of fun hearing the cast members from the show in those audio dramas, and you also participated in the Dark Shadows festivals, and joining the fellow cast members in Q&As. And I know you even wrote a reunion a vignette with Tony Peterson and Carolyn, with you and Nancy Barrett performed it, and I thought that was really great. That's on YouTube too. People can watch that.
Was it?
It is, yes, yeah. It's really great. Can you talk a little bit about your involvement in all of this and kind of rejoining this repertory group of actors? Because I know you said you didn't socialize a lot during the run of the show, but it seems like the cast has still remained close, or at least friendly with each other. There's a sort of a familial kind of a quality, I think, to the Dark Shadows cast. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I think that really came about when we started doing the Big Finish recordings, because we'd get together in the recording studio, and Lara and I really didn't know each other before. We really didn't, and we got to know each other very, very well,
Yeah.
and had so much fun. She was a wonderful, wonderful person. Had a fabulous sense of humor that I don't believe anybody really appreciated, But I could make her laugh, and she was very funny too. She would make me laugh,
Yeah.
and we had a lot of fun working together. We really did, and I think it showed in the end result. The two of us together. Uh, I was not playing. I mean, I was named Tony Peterson, but I was now a detective
Yes, yeah. Oh, yeah, they changed him into like a private
instead of a
investigator.
lawyer.
He
It
quit
was,
being a lawyer, and it was the
yeah,
Tony and Cassandra mysteries, which developed a following in those Big Finish audios. It kind of was almost a spin-off of all of that, and it was almost felt like a 70s, primetime paranormal investigator show with Tony and Cassandra
yeah.
investigating all these paranormal mysteries.
They were so much fun to do. We had a great time.
Everyone was devastated, that when she passed away. So, thank you for sharing that. Are there any other cast members that spring to mind that fun memories of them? Or because I had James Storm on the podcast recently, James Storm with his wife Valerie, and he told a funny story about how him and John Carlin couldn't get through a particular scene because you were just cracking up about everybody, the three of you were just kept cracking up, and he didn't remember what it was about, but he just remembered that Leela Swift was yelling at you guys because
He could yell.
you mentioned Thayer David earlier. Any thoughts about Thayer David?
Well, he was a wonderful actor, as you know, and
Mhm.
I don't, as I said, I didn't have
Yeah.
a lot of time to socialize with anybody. The only thing I could really say about any of the cast members would have to be, something that happened during rehearsal or shooting, because there was no socialization, at least, especially in the early days.
Mhm.
I know that some of the actors, maybe lived closer together or something. I lived way down in the village, and most of them lived up Upper West Side, I
Mhm.
think.
Somebody was asking the other day about the scene where Jonathan Frid is, where Barnabas is walling you up, and there's the scenes between you and Jonathan Frid were really intense. What were your feelings about Jonathan?
Again, I really can't. I never socialized with Jonathan. We never went out and had a drink together. In fact, I can say that about the whole cast,
Really? Yeah,
actually.
yeah.
I think maybe David Selby and I went out and had a drink together one time.
Okay,
Probably
yeah,
about it.
yeah. David's such a sweet guy. I've had him on the podcast a few times too. He's such a sweet person.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about Clarice Blackburn? Do you
Well,
remember?
Clarice, I got to know much better later on. She was one of the writers on Love of Life,
Uh-huh.
and uh, so I got to know her better then than I knew her on Dark Shadows.
I loved her too. She was a great
Yeah.
actress. I'm a great writer too and actress, but
Mhm.
she was often paired with you when she was Abigail. She's the one who brings her under,
Yes.
and then later on with Minerva and Gregory Trask. So
Yeah.
uh,
Minerva. Oh,
Minerva, yeah. So much fun. Nancy Barrett played your daughter in that storyline too. Nancy Barrett is a trip too. I mean, her characters, she did such fun characters too in that show.
Enzy Faye.
Pansy Faye, yes. Great stuff. Now you later on, I've had Don Glut on the podcast, and he mentioned he did a movie with you called Tales of Frankenstein. Do you remember anything about that?
Well, yeah, Don put together this series of vignettes for I guess, one of the anniversaries of the book,
Okay, yeah.
I think. So he offered me the part. It was, did you see it?
I haven't. No, I would like to
Uh,
at some point. Yeah.
it's a series of vignettes, as I said, and mine was um, a strange old curiosity collector,
Hmm. Okay, I see. Yeah.
and somebody came to me with a ring. Is it a ring? Yeah,
Okay.
a ring.
Okay.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
don't remember too much about it.
That's okay. No. What's your favorite role that you've ever played in stage, film, television? You've done so much. I mean, it's just, I was
Um,
looking through your IMDb and it's just so many things. I couldn't touch on everything, but I know we only have so much time, but what's your favorite role?
I always have trouble with favorites, but
Uh-huh.
I think probably I love playing the gentleman caller in Glass Menagerie. I love that
Okay.
part. And Harvey.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Oh, I wish I could have seen that. Oh,
yeah,
wow.
that may be my favorite on stage experience, because I felt a lot of affinity for Mr. Dowd.
Yeah.
And I remember Tom Poston told me once, he played the part quite a few times on tour.
Mhm.
And he said, the thing about Dowd is that uh, he's he's drunk all the time. And I said, No. Tom said, yeah, it's the only way to play him. He's got to be drunk from beginning to end. And I said, no, Tom, I can't I can't agree with that.
Yeah.
I played him as a pure, um, simple-minded man who was trying to be friends with Harvey and didn't see
Yeah.
anything wrong with it.
I think that's the correct approach, or the better approach. I shouldn't say correct, the better approach there for sure. I
Well,
agree.
thank you.
Yeah. um,
But
yeah.
they're all you know, debatable. I mean, you can take a character and you can play it many different ways.
Absolutely, yeah. Do you have anything coming up? Anything cooking with Ansel or other roles that you have coming up?
No, I'm just about, have it wrapped up now at 88. There's not much.
Well, you look great for 88. You look amazing. So I hope that you will come back and still continue to periodically do things. I know you're busy with, I know you're involved with the stocks a lot. That's the
Yes,
stock
keeps me
market.
busy.
My dad is
Keeps me
very
busy.
passionate. My father is very passionate about the stock market too. And
Yeah.
he keeps trying to get me. I mean, he got me involved in it a little bit. Like he showed me I do have some mutual funds and things like that, but I'm much more um right-brained. So I have a very difficult time kind of understanding some of the concepts when he's explaining it to me. Or maybe it's just the way my dad explains it. I should probably maybe if I watch some YouTube videos or something on the stock market, I would understand it a little bit better. But uh he's very passionate about it. He watches God, what's the guy on TV that's in the
Kramer?
Kramer? Yes, he watches Kramer whenever I go over there. If it's in the morning or something, he's watching Kramer.
No, I avoid Kramer.
Really? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I think he's all flash and no substance. But anyway,
That's the sense I get when I watch him too. I'm like, he's very
yeah,
theatrical. He's very
yeah,
he's
right.
very on all the time.
Yeah.
Um, but
Um, but you ask if I do have anything coming up, and I only have a voice deal with Half MT, Half
oh
MT Productions. They're doing a digital cartoon called The Threadlings
oh
about some little people that are made of threads, yarn people,
uh-huh.
and their biggest enemy are the moths.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And they have the whole script written out, and we did the first episode
Mhm.
of it, and so we're waiting to see how that turns out and if anybody buys it.
Are you playing a particular character in that, or do you
Yes.
read? Oh, okay.
No, I'm playing a character. He's an ex-warrior soldier,
Oh, okay.
threadling soldier, one
Okay.
arm.
Uh-huh. Well, we'll have to keep an eye out for that. If I hear anything about that, I'll definitely announce it on the podcast when it gets released.
Well, you can
So
take a look at Half MT,
half
letter
empty.
MT Productions
Okay.
on YouTube. They've got a whole. They record their ongoing progress,
Hmm.
so you can see it all about it on there.
Great. Wow. Okay. I'll keep an eye out for that. Before we go, I have to tell you a couple of things. Uh,
Okay.
I got a message from my friend John, and he said, "Have you seen Hocus Pocus 2, the film Hocus Pocus 2 with Bette Midler?" I said, "No, I hadn't seen it." He said, "You should watch it and pay attention when you watch it when they go to the past, to the Puritan times. There's a particular character is going to catch your attention." So I'm watching it. So they flash back to Salem in the 1600s, and there's a fanatical witch hunter in the show, and guess what his name is? Trask.
Really?
Yes, yeah, Hocus Pocus 2. There's a Puritan witch hunter, and they named him Reverend Trask. So I think that there was an homage there by the people who made Hocus Pocus too. So it just came out, I think it was a year or two ago. So yeah, so Trask is still having an influence on media. The 60th anniversary of Dark Shadows is going to be coming up in 2026. First of all, I hope there's some kind of a reunion of some sort. Would you be into participating in something like that if that happens?
Oh, sure.
Oh, good,
Wouldn't
good.
miss it.
Great. Okay, good. You heard it here, folks. Jerry wouldn't miss it. So fingers crossed that we'll have some kind of event for the 60th anniversary. They have to. And I look forward to anything else you do. I hope you do more with Ansel too, because I've really enjoyed seeing you in his films as well. And he's a great guy. I just would love to see you and do more with him too. Jerry, I want to thank you for taking the time to do this today. It's been an absolute pleasure and an honor to get to talk to you.
Thank you.
And
It's been a pleasure for me as well.
oh, thank you. And folks, thank you so much for listening. I hope you have a happy Thanksgiving, Jerry. You and Julia and your family, I have a wonderful Thanksgiving. And for those listening, have a great Thanksgiving. And please do subscribe to the podcast. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, please rate and review the podcast. That does help the podcast to reach more listeners. If you're listening on YouTube, watching on YouTube, please make sure to like the video. And once again, I want to thank Ansel for connecting us. So thanks again, Jerry.
My pleasure.
Okay, and then I'm just going to hit stop.
Terror at Collinwood is a Penny Dreadful production.